Row grouping is a process of taking a set of rows, grouping them by a common value in a particular column or maybe multiple columns, and then creating a summary for rest of the columns for that particular value set. Okay. So in this case, it is very similar to what you do within SOQL group by or an SQL function and all that. So this lets you do within a grid so that you can apply the row grouping for any of the grid within Brobench, or you can apply the row grouping even when you are limited by what you can do in Salesforce. For example, the Salesforce allows you to create not more than 2000 groups that you can fetch. If you have more than that, then it's going to give an error. So in that case, you can fetch whole data into the data grid and then you can group locally. Okay. So you can right click to access the grouping. You can right click on that and go to the group menu. So here you see various functions. So the first one, add to groups, adds this particular column to the grouping. If there's a first column, so it creates the grouping mode. It enters the grid into the grouping mode, and then it shows in a different way. We'll come and explore that. This particular menu, it lets you set the various functions for a non-grouped columns, how the values are created. Remember, when you are grouping, basically you're reducing the number of rows that you display by the one for that one row per one particular value in that particular column that you are grouping. So if there are other rows that are matching with the various values, you can define how they need to be summarized, right? So by default, it is a distinct that get applied for all other columns, but you can choose a different function if you want. For example, if you want a count of records, or if you want a sum, which is applicable if you have a number kind of columns like annual revenue or what have you. Or you can also apply something special called a list, and the list with count, as well as a first and the last. So as you can indicate, the first and last just shows the first and last value within that particular group. The list and count shows all the values in that group with a corresponding occurrence, number of occurrences. Okay, so let's go and do the apply group by this particular category. So when a group, as you can see, the view of the grid is changed. So it collapses all the rows and shows only the group summary. But if you want to see the detailed rows under each group, you can click on this and then you can see that. So the count that you see within this group header is a number of records within that particular group. For example, in this case, there are 116 objects of type change event. There are 101 of type feeds, and there are 4 of a custom data, and there are 355 of the standard data, so on and so forth. Okay, so you can add multiple columns into the group. For example, right now we are grouped by category. You can also see here, that what is that you group by, or you can also go to the group and here it lists what is that you are currently grouped by, just to orient yourself. For example, let's say now we want to group by the axis as a second level after the category. So you can right click on the axis, go to the group and say add to groups. So it will create the summary by the axis within the metadata category. For example, within metadata CD, that's a creatable and the deletable, there are 2 objects. That's interesting. You can't update it. Similarly, other access patterns that you have, the majority being the credit, means you can do all 4 the DML operations on that object. Okay, so you can see that it shows its group by category and then access, and it shows the various counts. For example, there are metadata 407, but within that there are blank access values 27. There are 2 of create and the deletable, so on and so forth. Okay. Once you are here, for example, in this case, name, right? So right now it shows that's a distinct, that is a default function, the aggregate function that is applied. So it just shows that how many distinct values are there. It doesn't make sense to apply count because count is already shown as part of the group header. So that's why we apply distinct as a default function, because that applies for all non-text column as well, like a dates and numbers and so on and so forth. But you can go ahead and change the function. For example, let's say I want to show the labels. of all the labels that are there within that particular group. So I can right click and say group set aggregate function, and then I can choose a list. Okay, so this will show the list of values within that particular group. Okay, so if there are repeated, they will not be shown. So it is actually deduped list of values. But if you want to see that same list with a count, you can choose list with the count. Okay, so in that case, it will show the count within that particular value. Okay, so remember, it may not be right thing to apply for the field, something like a label, because most of the time it's going to be unique. But it is something that usefully can apply for other categories. Okay. So if you want to remove a particular field from group, you can just go here and then say click on this. Or if you want to remove all of them at one go, you can go here and say remove group. So it will remove the group and go back to the normal data view. Okay. So now if you go back to that group one more time, add to groups, and then let's say I want to group by access, I can say group, add to groups. Now we have that. So once you have this grouping, you can actually expand and collapse more easily. So you can go to the groups and say expand all. So this will expand all the rows, that including the summary rows as well as the detailed rows in that. Or if you want to expand to only show the groups summary, so you can click on that. So this will show only the group summary and it hides the detailed rows, because in a grouping this is more important to see, and that is also default view, by the way. Or if you want to collapse everything, just show that high level summary, the first level, then you can do that collapse all. That will collapses the multiple groups also summaries onto one top level summary. Okay. um, so once you have this particular grouping, you can export this group summary. I mean, of course, you can here, you can copy this and then you can put into text input and all that. But you can also copy as a CSV, so that is much more usable to consume it. You can pass it on to the colleagues to analyze and whatever. For example, you can go here and say copy group summary as a CSV. So this will copy only the group summary records, not the detailed records, and the corresponding, the values and then the functions that you applied and all that. So now in this case, it is copied into the clipboard as a CSV, which you can open from within the Brobench as a CSV. So this is how it looks, for example. So we had a category, then access. So if it is a blank, so it means it is a summary at a whole metadata level. And this is the category, and the access is the second level data. And the count is a count of records for that particular row. In this case, it's a metadata, there are 407. Within that, they're readable 152, so on and so forth. Okay, so then you can see that here, you have various the aggregate functions that you've applied on the data that is shown there. Okay, you can also export this data. Uh, Instead of copying, you can go to the export other, and then the first options will be the group summary, export group summary as CSV. In this case, it will gonna download as the summary data, or you can also do summary as a Excel. In this case, it will download as a XLX file. Okay. So this is about the row grouping feature in Brobench.